This is the first DevOps Club that we start to build. We're working on that, Tal, Ben, and Lutan from Harbr Ventures. We had a very special guest today, Ed Sim from boldstart. Just some logistics. So we will leave time in the end for Q&A. We'll try to be polite, even though all of us are from the Middle East. So put on mute, write in the chat if you have questions, and then I will try to point you, and you will be able to ask Ed. And let's have fun, and feel free to ask anything, and I will try also to accommodate along the discussion if you have a question. So Ed, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, you maybe want to tell us a bit about boldstart, if someone in Israel don't yet about, everything about you.
Sure. Well, believe it or not, I made my first investment in Israel in 1999 in Jerusalem. So I was going back and forth to Israel many, many years ago. Wow, over 22 years ago. And in fact, 3 of our last 5 investments were in companies in Tel Aviv. So we're very excited about what's happening in Israel and believe it's more than just security, even though we love the security kind of being built in Israel. What we're all about is I've been a venture capitalist for over 25 years. And I started boldstart in 2010 when I saw AWS, well, before it was called AWS, have Amazon EC2 and the rise of open source. And a lot of enterprise founders are coming to me saying, I only need $1 million to get started. And so the whole idea of boldstart was to partner with technical founders on day one. Many times talking to founders before they start their business so that we can help them do everything to get to that first, Series A round and Series B round and scale from there. So that's kind of what we're all about. And we've added more operational support from product and people, but we're all about technical founders, making and creating new categories in the enterprise landscape.
Amazing. And first, of course, I didn't mention, but congrats about your new fund. I know that it's a bit old news, but if people don't know in Israel, you just finally right, boldstart 5 and also an opportunity fund, right? It's a total of $230 million.
Thank you.
Cool. So just, let's deep dive a bit more, about our discussions. And when do you invest, in a pre-product, right? So what type of founders are you looking to partner with? And if you can point a bit about Israel, it will be, I think, interesting for the crowd.
Yeah, no, so we love partnering with technical, product-driven founders who have a pain. Most of the founders that we meet are mission-driven, meaning that there's a problem that's been bothering them and nagging them for a long period of time. They think about it in the shower, in the car, on the commute. And so they're obsessed about solving this problem. And if they're an engineer, engineers like to actually create things. So that's when we love to meet founders. So it can be founders like Guy Bajarni from Snyk. We'd actually partnered with him in his first company called Blaze, which we sold to Akamai. And then he became CTO of Akamai, and we chat every month about all of his ideas. And he said, hey, I think there's an opportunity to actually make developer-friendly security, which was almost like a paradox, right? It's kind of developer-friendly and security just didn't match together. And he laid the vision for that. And so that would be an example. Another one would be BigID. We partnered with Dimitri and Nimrod as they were thinking about, it was pre-GDPR, but what they were really thinking about was how do you actually find all the PII kind of data inside of an organization? And could we build a business around that before GDPR? So those would be 2 examples. And then, Omri, we all know about M0, which, Ohad and Omri as well, actually had this pain because they were doing some consulting, helping people do infrastructure as code and build automations around that. And they thought they could build a product. So it's people that actually have experience and have this pain, and then they want to fix that problem. And that's what we love to fund.
And of course, I like this example of M0, right? It was my first investment as a general partnering role. Can you tell us a bit about, when you first met Ohad, why you decided, to invest in very early in M0, right?
Yeah, I felt that, first of all, Ohad and Omri had this pain. They had been working with a couple of our founders. They were working with Guy from Snyk, and they were working with Replicated as well, one of our other portfolio companies. And I think they laid out a clear vision for what the infrastructure as code market would look like over time. It was a really early market. There are a lot of templates and not a lot of automation. And Ohad and Omri kind of showed what they thought the market would look like. And more particularly, they understood who their user was. They understood that, hey, DevOps is the person that's setting up the templates, but I have to have developers love this product. And the opportunity we saw, and this is a big opportunity, I think, in developer first companies overall, is shifting everything in ops left to developers. And there's this battle between centralized governance, centralized policy from the enterprise, and then developers wanting freedom to kind of build things. And Ohad and Omri understood kind of that pain in the infrastructure as code market, and M0 is off to a really good start. They've built a really nice product. There's a lot more to do, but they also have users coming in from all over the world.
Yeah. So, and when you look, on the market side, people are coming to you, see so many solutions, and I know that you invest not only in Israel and not only in the US, right? I saw in your last tweet that you invest, I think, in 7, 8, 10 countries globally. So, what is the best way for founders in Israel to define, the main market? What is the TAM? What is the SAM? Where to go? To go to the US, to start in Israel, to go to Australia? What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the investments we make are almost intuitive because in the very beginning, there's usually no market map. There's no ability to kind of define a real TAM. And what I like to say is it's not the TAM that you start with, total addressable market, but the TAM you exit with. And what that really means is that the founders that we back have to be able to zoom in. They need to zoom in on the user of one. I think the problem that founders sometimes have, especially if they're trying to do something quote unquote developer first, is that they think their customer is an enterprise, a CIO or an organization or a CISO. Their actual customer and user, is the developer. And if they don't understand that, then they're not a developer first business. So what we like to see is that atomic focus on product, the obsessiveness about building and making it as easy as possible for developers to get 10 to 100 times productivity using your product versus not using something else, right? And so, from that, we think to ourselves, 2 to 3 years from now, if they actually capture this opportunity, how big could that be? What else are adjacent spaces they can move into? Maybe there's two or three different areas that we can brainstorm on, but we don't know which direction it would go. But even like Snyk, the question is if you can crack the code of developer friendly security, then every developer can use it, right? I mean but there's no TAM for it. There's no numbers for it, right? So we just had to focus on the product, and the product was so narrow. We started with JavaScript only. We literally focused on Node and JavaScript only, and all these enterprises would come to us and saying, hey, I need Java, I need this. We're like, no, we're just doing JavaScript right now. But the difference, what we were doing versus others, was that we went deep. Instead of just finding the vulnerabilities, we offered the ability to easily fix it. While another competitor called SourceClear covered 8 languages to start with, and they went wide, and then they went 1 inch deep. So they would find the vulnerabilities, and developers would get alerts, but then they'd have to scramble to figure out how to fix it. That was absolutely horrible. But the enterprises were buying it. The enterprises were buying $2-3 million of this stuff, but then eventually developers just revolted, and that ended up being a fire sale. And Snyk, we stayed focused. It was very hard, but we went very narrow, just very narrow, tiny market, just JavaScript alone. And we went very deep, and we fixed the problem. Then we added another language and another language and another language, and now it's worth almost $3 billion.
And this is a great example, Snyk, right? Can you remember from a long time back, how did you check, how did you do the diligence, right? Like the founders in this event, what they should do, right? Because there is not exactly the market. They can talk with you developers, but it's not enough, right? Because it's not giving the relevant information for them. So how they should start to do this product market fit before they come to you?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is that founders should partner with specialists who actually understand kind of the markets. So partner with, like a Grove in Israel, because all they do is enterprise, right? I mean, because if we're living and eating and breathing enterprise, we already know the pains. We already know the problems. So Guy was someone we backed already. So we were just waiting for him to start something. And he actually had 3 ideas. And we're like, those 2 ideas are nice, but the third one, I'll give you a check right now. And when he brought up the developer friendly security. And for us, you know, he was different in the sense that we've already worked with him. Kind of, we knew that if he could pull this off, it could be absolutely massive. And we also knew his ability to build product, right? The problem is that in the very early days, the things we want to see are two things. One is product velocity, i.e. you can think about a product, but actually you can build it, you know, quickly and iterate. And the second important area is hiring velocity, because you can't build product without actually hiring engineers. So if you can get those two right, and we believe that coming out of the gates, you can get those two right. Let me give you an example. You know, perhaps you're two founders starting a company, and you're looking to raise, and you have kind of, you know, a focus on a product, you have your user, but then also you have 4 more engineers ready to join you, and you need the check because you have engineers ready to join you because you've been thinking about this for 6 months. That's velocity out of the gate, right? If you can bring 3 engineers on board that you've worked with, it shows that people will follow you. It shows that you can probably tell a story, and it shows that you can get things going. So I would say that that's important. As far as diligence, if I were meeting a new founder, I'd say a couple things. One is understanding their ability to tell a story, right? Because if they can't tell a story, they can't attract a co-founder. They can't attract kind of new talent to their team, and they can't raise capital, or they can't sell to customers. So I think technical founders have to be able to sell and tell a story. That's the most important thing that we look for. Second is a deep focus on product. They need to zoom in and tell me who the user is, not the enterprise. It's easy to say, I can sell into the Fortune 500, the Global 2000, I can sell to the CISO, and I have 50 CISO relationships, but that doesn't solve a problem for me. It doesn't tell me you can build a product and be really narrowly focused on a product. Then, depending on the market or opportunity, considering, you know, if you work with a Grove or a boldstart, we have a network of people. I'll introduce you to 2 or 3 other founders in the portfolio who probably have significant expertise building something in an adjacent domain, and we'll have them vet your technical skills. We'll do reference checking just kind of with people that you've worked with in the past. And what we're looking for is, once again, have you built a product from scratch before? You know, can you get product out the door? You know, can you organize a team around you and build a team, right? Those are important. And the final piece would be, we'd probably introduce you either to a couple of startups in the portfolio that are like Series D or E that might be customers of your product, or we may introduce you to some Fortune 500s. We have a lot of CIOs and CTOs invested in our fund, depending on what kind of company you have. So all that stuff can happen in days. Like if we are really focused on something, we can get people behind you in days and move very quickly, because that's how quickly some of these opportunities are moving.
I think I never told you, Ed, but I was shocked on the process you did with M0. It was so fast. You know, I remember that you did maybe 3 or 4 intros. They did few phone calls in 1 or 2 weeks, and you just decided, okay, let's go. You know, without all the nonsense before and after. You know, when you decided to decide and you didn't ask too many people, you get good feedback, and it's really, really fun to see that. You know, it's sometimes you see entrepreneurs going after circle and circle and circle with people like us, and it's not fun. Right?
It is it's frustrating for sure. And that's why also I think having specialists that understand the space, you don't have to explain what infrastructure as code is, right? You want people to understand kind of what your business is.
Exactly. And Ed, one more question. What are the top 3 mistakes you see, you know, entrepreneurs in DevOps domain are doing, you know, in marketing, in business, in product?
Yeah, I would say the number 1 mistake is not knowing who your user is. You know, because if you can't get one user to actually use your product and have the feeling that they can't live without it, then it doesn't matter anything else, right? So I think that's the number 1 piece, because I've seen companies saying that they're a developer first company, and then you look at their 3 milestones they want to raise their A round, and you see 5, you know, customers, 100K and above, you know, blah, 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 but there's nothing about developers. I'm like, how are you a developer first? Are you saying you're a developer first company because you think that's what's going to get you evaluation? But you actually have to live it. Second thing is not being patient. I mean, Amri, you know this just as well as I do, having lived through M0, is that, you know, we kind of were discovering what was happening in the market, and we're talking to lots of enterprises. And, you know, it's when you create a new category, it's hard to actually go reach out to all these enterprises, because you know, they're just going to waste your time, because they're just waiting for the category to become something relevant. You need to actually go reverse. You need to do content marketing. You need to go super aggressive in the guerrilla marketing and build out a community and have them come to you. And that takes time, because I see a lot of founders wanting to skip steps, and you have to be patient. So some of these things can take a couple of years. I mean, it took us a couple of years to get 100,000 downloads into Snyk. In the early days, it was really slow. And Guy would go from meetup to meetup, conference to conference, speaking about what developer-friendly security was, and people were like, I don't get it. And as you know, with M0, we went all bottoms up after having some conversations with some enterprises. And now every day he's telling us, oh, so bank from South Africa signed up, you know, companies in the US are signing up, companies in London. So you got to be really patient, and you can't skip steps. So I would say those are the two most important mistakes that we see all the time. And the third one I'll tell you is this. I think for a lot of startups, capital is not the constraint to growth. It's human capital that's a constraint to growth. And if you don't think about culture from the very beginning, what kind of culture you want to build at the company, I mean, from the day you get your investment, if you don't think about kind of how you want to hire people, what kinds of people you want to hire, what mission you have, what values you have, and sounds like almost like trite in a way, but I think it's really important to get that started. And as important it is to build that funnel to get developers using your product, you also have to build a funnel to show people why you're the most exciting company to work for, why you're a mission-driven organization, and why people are going to enjoy working with you. Because at the end of the day, there's, you know, I think there's less talent out there than there is kind of demand for it right now for some of the hot startups. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I really agree with the last one. Of course, you know, it's especially now in Israel, it's a very, very competitive market. Many startups, and I think it's not so easy to know which one is the best, right? We don't know, and I guess also people that go to work in those startups, they don't know in day one or on the first 20 employees. So it's a very important one. Now, Ed, maybe you can tell us. I'm not sure everybody in Israel know about on your investment in Slim AI.
Yeah, so Slim AI, we actually partnered with some Israeli co-founders there in some of the ex-CloudLock folks. So Sahi and Ron and Gil Zimmerman, started this along with John Amaral and Kyle Quest. And the idea around Slim was this, is that we felt that the DevOps process, particularly around containers, there's very little innovation in the container space other than Docker. And what ended up happening is that containers ended up getting bloated, right? Some of these containers are 5-6 gigabits in size. And when you're deploying it 100 to 1,000 times a day, it slows everything down. The second thing we saw in the whole software delivery supply chain is that a lot of times DevOps would get involved and would have to approve the use of containers. And that could take weeks or months. So Slim is all about streamlining that process. And so what we do is we analyze what's in your container, so you can understand kind of what is, what pieces of software and what dependencies are built in there, so that DevOps doesn't have to spend all this time approving and trying to understand what's in there. Secondly, we slim it down. We slim it down by 30 times or more, so that when it gets integrated into your CI/CD process, we can speed up deployment. So it's all about bridging the gap between app developers and DevOps together so that we can deploy things faster. And there's an open source community built around it right now. They had tens of thousands of downloads, very strong team. So we're excited about, and we think containers are still very early in kind of that whole delivery process. So there's a big opportunity there.
Cool. And one more question is, I see you tweet about it a lot. So do you think the DevOps domain is becoming a bit too crowded? Can you still identify spaces in which startup can still bring value? Because from the other side, right, to be an entrepreneur, and you see, so many problems, but some areas are crowded, some are not. What are your insights about it today?
Yeah, I would say that every space is crowded, Omri, because everyone wants to be a developer investor in DevOps. So that's number one. I think what's really interesting to us is really understanding anything that sits in the DevOps domain, but that actually has a product-led growth kind of mentality. I'll give you another good example. So DevOps can be two things. One is shifting things left to the developer, and there's still a lot of opportunity in security. We just made 2 more bets in security that are unrelated to Snyk. That's about shifting kind of more responsibility left to the developer so that you don't have to get security engineering as involved and you can streamline kind of that deployment process. The other aspect would be on the ops side itself. We invested in a company called Jelly, JELI.io. And this woman, Nora Jones, she was the senior chaos engineer at Netflix, head of chaos engineering at Slack. And she's had this lifelong mission to do better incident analysis. So when your pager goes off, pager duty, your systems blow up, sure, you need to fix it and find the root cause. But then what you really need to do is analyze all that data and do a postmortem and learn from those incidents. And she's created this bottom-up platform where you can sign up and start grabbing data from all your different systems to help understand and do these postmortems faster. And she's signed up 5 super impressive customers and built a community around that called learningfromincidents.io. So I'd say that ops side, kind of that SRE angle, I think the SRE is almost like the new kind of DevOps person. That area is going to be exploding, I think, in the next year or two. And then the other piece around that would be chaos related stuff. We have a stealth investment in Germany, but around that, but Amazon finally came out and said they're going to do some chaos experiments. But typically a chaos experiment is all about the ops side. Amazon's coming out with an approach where developers can start injecting failure kind of pre-production. And we have a company already doing that across the spectrum where it's shifting, fault injection kind of left to developers. So there's a lot of opportunity. You just have to, find the right area to start.
Cool. And following that, right, we see so many communities, right, around specific domains like infrastructure as code, like cloud communication platform, like Twilio, API, like Rapid API. How can a new startup in Israel do the right step from day one to build such community, right? Join a community, be integral part of it, right, from day one, because it takes a long process to build it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think open source is probably one of the greatest mechanisms to build community. I view it, it's a movement, but also view it as an opportunity to do kind of top of funnel marketing and to engage with users and whatnot. So that'll be one example. Another example would be, very early on in the product itself, you've got go-to-market and product go hand in hand from the very beginning. So if you want to actually build this frictionless bottom-up company, you got to make sure that it's incredibly easy to use, that there's almost zero friction from the time someone reads about what you're doing and signing up. So you got to think about that. And the third thing I would say is hire a DevRel or evangelist early. Start thinking about your content marketing. Start thinking about the library of what you're going to release every couple of weeks. So I think all those things. When we invested in Jelly, by the way, Nora had already built a learning from incidents community from scratch with some of the best SREs out there. So she found 5 or 8 influencers who she was friends with, and they started already contributing articles. And she built a Slack community that she watched for 6 months before she even started her company to see kind of what the engagement was around that. So there's lots of ways you can actually do it, but finding those influencers, hopefully you're one of them themselves, and bringing them together and starting, whether it's a Slack community or a Discord community or whatever, you can do that even before you start your company.
Cool. And you mentioned before, but still I want to ask, what is bigger challenge these days, in what you see in US and other places in the world for founders, to find capital or finding talent, or do you see different trends maybe in Australia, in England, or in Israel, in the US?
Yeah, I would say that, look, I mean, I know that everyone is always trying to raise capital, but I find that once you get your first round of capital from the right partners, then, if you start executing your business, more capital comes before you're even ready. So in a weird way, I'd say, and I've been writing about it a lot too, is that sometimes having too much capital is a problem too. And you get high expectations put into your business. You feel like you need to spend it all, even though you may not have product market fit. So there could be different challenges. But, I think overall, I think the human capital problem is the biggest problem, period. That to me is the gating factor between, getting more product out the door, finding a designer, finding an amazing designer that understands enterprise product is really, really hard. Finding a DevRel or community person who's super experienced, really, really hard. So those are some hires that you're going to want to prioritize early. So you should probably start thinking about kind of what that 6-month ramp looks like about that.
Cool. And today, how do you qualify a DevOps company to go to the public market? Do you think that many companies will follow the recent DevOps IPOs, or it's only happening now after the pandemic, and you know, when COVID will be done, no more IPOs of DevOps.
Yeah, I think that the whole DevOps, or I'll call it developer first to make it broader. I think we're just starting at the very beginning right now. I mean, the number of developers is increasing tremendously. You know, Satya from Microsoft always talks about, you know, in his earnings transcripts about number of developers using all his products. And that's what he talks about every single quarter. So Wall Street now is attuned to understanding what developers can do. When I started doing venture capital 25 years ago, it was like, you know, even as recently as 10 years ago and 5 years ago, if you have a company selling to developers, it's a niche opportunity. You'll never get big. And I think looking at Twilio today, I think that turned the model upside down. I think on the DevOps side, looking at Datadog, it turned it upside down. I think JFrog, obviously, which is in Israel, doing quite well working with developers, turned it upside. So I don't think people are asking that question anymore. And I think that the next 10 years, you're going to see a ton of developer first API companies kind of going out to the markets, and every industry, I think, you know, can be developer first. You know, instead of being top-down enterprise sales, I think kind of winning the hearts and minds of developers first can actually lead to breaking lots of different things, right? Because you know, everything's interconnected now. You know, almost everyone can be a developer, no matter how you think about it. And you know, I think the bar basically will be, you know, $100 million of trailing revenue, and you can get a really massive kind of company done, and the market is huge. So I'm excited. I'm bullish over the next 10 years about what this trend is.
Cool. It's, you know, we record this session, so we can use it to tweet in 2 years from now. Let you know if it was right or wrong.
Cool.
So I encouraging everybody, you know, please start writing your question, because in order to make it organized, I will just point to people who try questions, so feel free to start. So Ed, about Israel, you know, what made you fall in love with Israeli and especially Israeli founders?
Well, first of all, my kids are Jewish, so my wife is Jewish, so that's personally that's one of it. Two is, you know, when I went to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, I just, you know, I love the culture there, and just I love the startup nation attitude, right, of just getting things done and really being direct, and there's amazing engineering there, and I've really enjoyed kind of watching all the markets grow over the last, you know, 20 plus years in Israel. So as I said, 3 of our last 5 investments were kind of in the Tel Aviv area, and they're all kind of engineering related and developer first, and not all of them are security, which is another thing that I know people always talk about security, but I just love the people and culture there, because, you know, things happen quickly.
Any company that you feel that you're in all these 25 years you missed in Israel, that you talked with them, they sent you presentation, and from some reason you didn't do the investment?
Oh, any company, period? Yeah, well,
in Israel, you know, not
in
not
Israel.
globally,
Yeah,
but
I need to think of, I need to think about that one. Nothing kind of comes off the top of my mind, because I'm really happy about the ones that we have. So.
And in the US, any Facebook or Google that you missed?
The one that stands out in my mind was the first company that was kind of building out this developer ecosystem called Web Methods. I put a term sheet on it for pre back in, you know, early 2000, and it was accepted. But then I was working at a firm that had to that had money from the New York City government, that had to have companies build an office in New York, you know, within a year, and they did not want to build an office in New York, and the company ended up going public and was one of the first kind of XML developer platforms out there, and was worth billions. So that was definitely something that stung.
Cool. And last question from my side, you know, how can a potential founder talk to you? You know, there are many people here and more people that will listen to it after that. So what is the first step to get an investment from boldstart?
Yeah, I mean, for folks in Israel, I would say that it's always, we're not kind of on the ground in Israel, so we always go through trusted partners. So, you know, going through folks like Omri and, you know, wanting to partner, you know, we like partnering with Israeli VCs kind of on the ground, so we can kind of partner together to help build a great company with you. I'll say the second way is just meeting some of our founders, right? You know, people reach out to us through Danny and Asaf from Snyk and Guy. People reach us through Nimrod and some of his talent at BigID. And that's always the best way, because these warm referrals from people that have known them for many years is always, or Ohad and Amri from M0, those are always important to us, right? People that are trusted sources coming to us and making the introduction. You can always find me on Twitter and DM me and do all those other things, but I can tell you, it definitely rise to the top if you come from people that we already know. It shows that you can network too.
Yeah, no, I also believe it's a good basic test, right? If people can find a nice way to approach you or any other VCs, of course, especially from Israel to the US. So Ron, you want to start, Ron Gidron, with your first question?
Yeah, hi, sure. Thanks for your time, Ed. I think we spoke once. We got coffee for about 5 minutes, a long time ago.
How are you?
So I was just going to ask about the challenge of hiring and culture. And one of the challenges that I'm facing and the thoughts about solving that with all remote. So the model company for me is GitLab in that sense.
Yeah.
Kind of notorious for all remote. So if you can, I mean, how do you feel about that? And like as a principle, and do you think that's how does culture kind of fit into that? What have you seen? What do you think?
Yeah, the other one would be HashiCorp as well. So sure. Actually, I have a weekly newsletter called what'shot.substack.com, and I shared some of Mitchell Hashimoto's kind of comments about remote first. He believes that 100% remote is better than partially remote and partially kind of together. But the one thing, and I've talked to him in the past, I led a small session with him and Wade from Zapier a couple years ago, talking about kind of remote culture. And I think if you're going to go fully distributed, and go remote, then you also have to have a culture of documentation. Everything has to be kind of written down, and you have to have people that can write really well, because that is going to be your spoken language for the most part. And the other thing I see actually as this, as COVID happened and some of our companies that weren't fully distributed, started going remote first, is that they hired kind of remote first kind of people officers to build culture. Like, how do you kind of create those things? I mean, this is for a larger company when you're about 100 people or more, but how do you create kind of small events to get people together? How do you get teams together? How do you create that bonding that never existed before? So, as I said, I think you should take a look at my newsletter and read some of those things from Mitchell as well. But I think, documentation and then finding ways to kind of making sure that you still have that feeling of being together, I think is really important. But talent-wise, you just have to remember that it's think about the time zones, because if you're too far away, then it becomes problematic in terms of getting things done quickly. And I think the second thing you need to think about is that talent works both ways, because now if you go global, you're competing with everyone else in the world for talent too. So you have to think about both in terms of that.
All right. Thanks.
So until people will ask more questions, so Ed, you maybe want to tell us a bit about your investment in Superhuman. I'm not sure everybody know that you maybe the first investor in Superhuman.
Sure. So about 75% of our investments are developer first, and the other 25% is horizontal SaaS. We like kind of big, broad horizontal markets. Rahul, once again, is a founder that we backed before. We funded his first company, Reportive. And we actually like crazy ideas. And so, we helped Rahul kind of through his process when he sold to LinkedIn. And Rahul came back to us, and Reportive was basically, he was the first person that hacked into Gmail to create kind of this application and turn it into an application platform. And he basically created this little sidebar inside of Gmail. Whenever you sent an email, you can actually read everything about that person. And then he was creating a developer platform around that. And then LinkedIn bought him. But Superhuman, Rahul came to us and said, hey, this is what Gmail looks like today. And he X'd out all the garbage, all the clutter that you're looking at in Gmail. And he goes, I'm going to create the fastest email that's 100 milliseconds or less. It's going to be beautiful, elegant, and simple. And I'm going to charge people $29 a month for it. And so he was so convicted, and it's a lifelong mission of his, because Reportive was kind of like that as well. So we're just like, where do we sign? Like, can we write $1 million check now? He made us dribble in $250 at a time over like 3 or 4 months. He wouldn't take the full $1 million, but now the company is growing really fast, and he's created a movement. People thought he was crazy again. That's what we like, crazy founders. They thought he was crazy. How are you going to charge for email? How are you going after, free? what is this onboarding process? How do you scale actually spending an hour at a time with people to kind of, get them on board? But what people didn't realize was that the reason why he did this bespoke onboarding, which he's kind of shortened the time frame, is because a couple things. One is he pre-qualified people through Typeform before he actually decided to bring them on board. And secondly, when he did the bespoke onboarding, it was not only the product, but he was teaching them the experience of Superhuman, the movement and the brain, wiring the brain of how to get to inbox zero. And what that ends up doing is reducing churn, right? When you have this kind of connection with someone, it ends up reducing churn right off the very bat. And as you know, churn could be the killer for any company. So that was kind of some of the thesis behind it.
Oh, this is cool story. So, Roy Margalit, you want to be the next one?
Sure, thanks. So as I wanted to ask, like, what do you think is critical to have in the founders and that they cannot leave to the other employees of the company? Like, how do you know who else you need to join you, except of course, good relationships and trust?
For us, the vision and the mission of the business has to start with the founders. Like, why are you doing this? What problem are you solving? And having that early unique technical insight usually comes from the founders, right? The reason for why you're building the company and why you think it's gonna be 10 to 100 times better than what's already out there. So that has to start with you. Usually, I mean, you're probably the first product person, you're probably the first salesperson, right? You're doing those things through the Series A. And then as you get bigger and bigger and the demands of you being a technical founder, becoming, a true CEO, then you start hiring your team out, right, over time, and you probably end up getting a product manager and things like that. But that early product vision and North Star is really, really important. There's a great story. Daniel Dines from UiPath, and Daniel is a friend, and he's an investor in our funds. One of his colleagues was telling me that even today, when they're about to launch a new product, and it's on the big screen, and there's hundreds of people in the room, Daniel will walk in and just start pointing out even little deficiencies in the product on the screen. Like, here's a design flaw. What's this? What's this? So his mind, no matter how big it is, it's about to be a massive IPO, is dialed in on the product. Rahul worries about every single pixel on Superhuman, even though his team is 50 people. So that idea about product and design has to come from the founder, right? And if we don't see that kind of embedded kind of in their DNA, I think it's hard to really build a business around it. I mean, then there's looking at people like Steve Jobs, right? Product. And that's the basis for a company and the CEO.
Thank you, Ed. This is great. And Ira, you want to be the next one?
Okay, so first I'd like to comment on what you said regarding the founders. And, I've being a serial founder of startups. At one point in time, founders should understand that when it comes to marketing of the products, in many cases, they have to step aside. I know it's very difficult, especially for Israeli VCs, to understand it. When founders come to them and they say, guys, we're going out for Series A funding because we need to go for marketing and we'll probably look for a new CEO. And they look at you with a rather peculiar look saying, what do you mean? Are you leaving the company? I said, no, guys, but we need that. My expertise when it comes to innovation, to product development, doesn't necessarily mean that marketing the products across the seas in the 5 continents is the best quality. Maybe I'm not the best qualified for it. But the point I wanted to ask you is something else. What about the combination of hardware and software? Israeli VCs are very reluctant even to look at hardware. They want to see SaaS. That's it. Simple, sort of short range return of investment, even if it's not sustainable and risky. When it comes to developing real hardware, which has an edge and seems sustainable, they're still very reluctant to look at the combination of hardware and software for full solution. What is Bold stand regarding such solutions?
Look, I mean, I think there's lots of great hardware software combinations out there, and increasingly everything's becoming more software related, and hardware is just the delivery mechanism. But for the most part, for our side, we're 100% software. There are lots of other great investors that are doing combinations of both. So I would just make sure that you target kind of those folks, to be honest with you. There's so much capital out there and so many specialists doing certain things. And there are even specialists actually doing hardware software combinations. So that's what I would really focus on.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Drew, you want to be the next one? Drew Elad?
Sure. Hey, nice to meet you, and thank you for your time. I'd like to know, get your take a little bit about the balance or how you see, open source versus SaaS model, pricing models, and so on. And what's your take, especially in the dev first environment?
Yeah, so I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? Because I think open source is a great way to build a community and get your kind of product out the door, and even perhaps get contributors to help kind of speed up the software development process, find the bug fixes, et cetera. So we're just closing on a company today that's an open source company out of Israel, where they have a pretty active community in the security space. So, but the question is how do you make money? And I think that how you make money, GitLab did a very good job of, having some open source software, but then also having the hosted solution, right? Having the SaaS piece. So I think SaaS is a great way to actually go from open source to kind of revenue opportunities. And even Slim, what we're doing is we've got the open source project, but you've got to download the package, you got to set it all up and blah, blah, blah. And, with our SaaS version, we'll have something called X-Ray, which will allow you to analyze what's in the container, but that'll be on the SaaS side. And then there'll be opportunities where you can actually have kind of a whole dashboard to manage an enterprise deployment of all your different containers using Slim, and having Slim kind of incorporate into your CI/CD system. So I think you should think about the hosted opportunity as a great way to make money. If you start with the open source, kind of what are you going to do on the hosted side that's going to be different, and how are you going to monetize that? But I think that's a tried and true method of monetization around it.
Great. And Omer,
Thanks.
do you want to be the next one?
Yes, thank you. Continuing Drew's questions, some thoughts about the B2D strategy regarding open source community or entirely open source product versus the software cycle, the life cycle environments such as GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, etc.
Are you asking about kind of how you build the community, or
how you build, like what are your thoughts about the recommended go-to-market strategy when you address developers? Is it like mandatory to go through GitLab environment first, or one of their marketplaces?
No, I mean, usually most of the companies that I know start and kind of build their own movement, right? I mean, as I said, whether it's through your own open source, whether it's through, starting with your kind of blog posts and launching on Hacker News or whatever that is, you usually want to kind of build your own and not kind of, it's hard. You'll get lost if you decide to start with building on top of a marketplace, hoping to get discovered. If you go to like the GitHub marketplace or the AWS cloud marketplace, there's hundreds of solutions there. You've got to build your own. You've got to show that you can kind of, there's a reason that you exist. There's a reason why you're starting the business. And as I said, you've got to go evangelize that and show people the product, go on Twitter, go on Hacker News, find all the ways to reach these people. Do local meetups, right? For the DevOps community. I know there's a big DevOps community in Israel. Find ways to get out there and start small and local.
Great, thanks. So a big part of it is building the community or contributing to the DevOps community in order to leverage your product.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's very few moats in software. Everything can be copied in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, right? I mean, and over time, a couple moats that exist are community. If you build a rabid community over time, that's a moat that is hard to replicate, especially as you go from 1 to 10 and you add 3 more zeros to it. It's hard to kind of dethrone you if you have a rabid community that loves your product and contributes. That's another benefit of open source as well. And I would say the other moat is data, right? Maybe the more customers you have, the more data you have to help make smarter decisions. So those would be the two that I think about. I mean, think about all the data that GitHub is sitting on right now. So they have a rabid community, but think about all the code sitting there, all the data that's sitting there, that's pretty intense.
Thank you.
Cool. We're almost in the end, so Yaniv, Eitani.
Hi. So I'm wondering, like, how do you feel about the AIOps vertical, and like more specifically about root cause analysis, and like what opportunities do you see in this area?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen a lot of stuff around AI ops, for example. You know, our opinion would be, look, at the end of the day, AI ops will help streamline kind of all the alerting and help people make faster decisions. But, you know, I also think that these organizations are afraid to fully go AI ops, because if you end up shutting something down or turning the wrong thing down and your site's down or whatever, it becomes a big problem. So, you know, that's why we've gone more towards almost like, you know, the companies like Jeli.io, which sits on top of all the data, but there's a combination of real humans in the loop to help understand kind of what those problems are. So look, we've seen a ton of AI ops companies. I don't think it's ever going to be a full black box to go full AI ops. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're going to identify and diagnose everything. Because if you think about it, a lot of organizations and the software that's built, there's usually one person sitting in the corner that was there from the very beginning. And that's a person you call all the time when things go down, right? And trying to unlock that person's brain is going to be really hard to do. And I don't think AI ops is going to really be able to fully understand, you know, how this person built something and you know, when there's a problem, diagnosing it.
So that's definitely what we found out talking with customers, but that you need the human in control. And like if you're talking about specifically about like root cause analysis and pointing like the DevOps or the developer to like you know, a long part of the way to solving the issue, do you think that's interesting, or any observation on that?
I would say, look, there's lots of companies kind of going after quote unquote the AI ops stuff. I've seen less and less over it. It was a big movement about 18 months ago to 2 years ago. AI ops was everything. And I haven't really heard much about it lately. Look, I think anything that helps people find things faster, and root cause analysis, that's a big industry. You find things faster and search through the solutions and then apply their own thinking to it is always helpful. But, you know, I always wonder kind of, you know, how big those companies can be, right? Because, you know, every company that's already doing root cause analysis has kind of AI, they have the data. So you really need to think about what your entry point is and, you know, who else is out there that's layering this stuff on already.
Thank you.
Cool. So Uri, I think you will be the last one, and then I'll do some summary and continue with the rest of the day for Ed. So
hi,
Uri.
Yeah, hi, Uri. Yeah, hi, Ed. First, it was really interesting so far. So yeah, I have a general question. So I work for a SaaS company, and we've targeted academia until now, and now we're going more towards industry. And we find it hard always to gain the trust of companies with a SaaS platform that deals with sensitive data. And often these companies, they push towards on-prem solutions or private instance solutions. And I'm guessing that a lot of companies are going through similar problems. You always want to stay at the SaaS level because maintenance is much easier. I was wondering what your thoughts are and experience these kind of.
Yeah, no, I think that's a question we run into all the time. And I guess a couple things. One is, you know, I would try to default for customers that are cloud only to start with, right? Secondly, if you end up kind of going down the route of even if your business is just, if that's 80% where people say that the data is sensitive, I don't want it there, you should look at solutions like our portfolio company, replicated.com. If you're using Kubernetes, it allows you to deploy to your SaaS environment, but also deploy to any other customer while maintaining one code base. So it gives you we like to say at Replicated, we ship the application to you and you don't ship the data to us, right? So that would be, so there's all these ways, we call it modern on-prem to kind of do this. And the third, you know, solution would be, you know, perhaps there's a way you can create an agent where the data doesn't kind of leave the organization, but then, you know, you encrypt it and it goes to the cloud and then you're doing your analysis there. I don't know what your solution or product is, but there could be kind of a proxy server you can throw in there that keeps their data there, but then you can do your AI or machine learning or whatever it is you're doing and process it in the cloud and ship it back. So I would say there's lots of different solutions, but if you keep running into it, then you should look at Replicated, because that's one of the easiest ones. HashiCorp is using it, Sysdig's using it, UiPath is using it. It's becoming an industry standard.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so Ed, first, thank you very much, right? Joining us early in your morning in the East Coast in the US. Second, it's always a pleasure to talk with you and pleasure to work with you, of course. I hope that we'll meet face-to-face. I'm not sure that in reInvent this year face-to-face, because we are much faster than you with the vaccine, right, in Israel. So let's see if we will meet in Vegas.
I've talked to you so many times. I've talked to you so many times in video. I forgot that we haven't even met face to face yet. It doesn't even feel like it. So
no, I think last time was in lunch in Vegas with Adam and we, but
oh yeah,
long time back.
Ago.
Yeah. Well, so everybody, thank you very much, and Ed, toda rabba.
Thank you, Omri. I love working with you and Grove, and we'll find more together.
Thank you.
Take care.
See you soon.